Ladies, gentlemen, and haradrim of all ages, with the imminent arrival of a brand new patch hitting Diablo 4 the day after this video comes out, containing quite a few things, but most importantly, probably the Gauntlet, the new score farming repeatable fixed seed dungeon activity with leaderboards to prove that you are better than the rest. And this isn't just a seasonal thing either, it is a permanent addition to the game, which makes it extremely interesting, especially this early iteration of it that could easily be changed quite a bit in a few months with player feedback. That said, today we are going to talk a bit about the Gauntlet, specifically with how each class will do within it. The leaderboards themselves will be divided by class, of course, so you are only really competing against others within the same class, but of course, for the sake of seeing big score numbers, we're going to rank which class we expect to do the best down to the one that we expect to do worst, and we're also going to talk about the generally best builds that each class has access to for the specific activity that the Gauntlet is, and what we expect to perform the best on average, of course outside of Gauntlet weeks that might require some build change-ups. Starting off then, let's go with the likely to be lowest scoring class for this activity, which is going to be Necromancer. The specific reason for this is honestly, regardless of build, Necromancer just is not physically fast. It does not move quickly, and even with the changes in patch 1.3.3, you will gain like 12% movement speed at the cost of some of your damage, which isn't fantastic. The damage that Necro can do though, and the general build that I expect to do the best in Gauntlet in general for the class, we already have up on the channel right now as a video, which is a Bone Spear build with Corpse Explosion worked into it, which should be especially good after the buff that it is getting in the patch, and this also uses Lidless Wall for bonus Bone Storms too, so that you're basically just as sorted as you could possibly be for damage and survivability, at least on tier 70 equivalent monsters, but the speed of it will simply be a hard wall for Necro when piling up score compared to the other classes. The class that I expect to have the second lowest score then as a whole is actually going to be the Rogue, and the main reason for this is not the same as Necromancer, as any Rogue players will know that you can be pretty damn speedy, though honestly still not as speedy as the top 3 can be, and the damage and survivability are generally more than good enough in top Rogue builds for this as well, but the problem for Rogue is you don't generally get one build that is both excellent at AoE and mob clearing and also excellent at single target. You really sort of have to choose, and the Gauntlet will have loads of tiny monsters but also multiple bosses, which makes single target a bit more of a concern as well than it would be in a normal dungeon. All that said, the build that will likely do the best is the one that is just performing best for Rogue right now in general, which is Penetrating Shot. It's just in an excellent place right now compared to the rest of the builds that the class has access to after all the changes that were given to the class at the start of the season. Third up then, and honestly it's hard to say this given how cool the recent developments have been for them, it's Druid. I wish I could put Druid higher, because I absolutely love the stuff the Druid community has been coming up with as of late. This is Boulder Shred. It takes the concept of shred builds, which are all about speed and teleporting from one enemy to the next back to back, combines it with the Boulder unique amulet that makes it swing in circles around you for its duration, which honestly does extremely high damage, both AoE and single target as well if you build up enough of them, which generally is dependent on enemy density, which should absolutely not be an issue for the Gauntlet as we know it. As far as why this is third then, I expect this to reach some pretty crazy scores, honestly, and I love the build concept in general. I'm a really big fan of it, but even with Shred being extremely fast as a movement tool, it's still going to be slower at purely moving around the place than the other two classes at the top of the list, which is a really big factor, and even with the damage this pumps out, it still is less damage than the other two as well, but I still expect it to be enough to overtake Rogue and Necro scores quite handily. Then in the second highest score slot that we have, what might surprise some people, which is Barbarian. Yes, Barbarian, which can hit for hundreds of millions in singular slams, one-shotting bosses constantly all over the place, treating the most challenging content currently in the game like it's a child play toy. And yes, I'm putting it second. The reason? Movement speed. And that's saying something, because especially with only tier 70 equivalent monsters in the Gauntlet, charge builds are actually incredibly viable and strong, being good enough to one-shot most of the enemies at that difficulty. And the specific build that I recommend we also have on the channel as a video, which is a Hammer of the Ancients effect version of the charge build. The idea being it's mostly built around charge, with just enough on Hammer of the Ancients to let you slam down for massive damage whenever you run into a larger enemy like a boss, which is perfect for the Gauntlet, right? Well, the thing is, even with one-shotting every enemy that you come across and the movement speed of a no cooldown charge, there is still some slight slowdowns that you just can't ignore. For example, there's a delay in between charges. You can't just literally spam them back to back even without a cooldown. As well, it takes time for charge to get from point A to point B compared to, say, a teleport. And also, if you have to use hota, that will also slow you down because of the recovery animation of it. It's a pretty long strike. So while you will murder everything with ridiculous pace, I still think those slight hiccups in the movement speed will be the main difference maker at tier 70 difficulty monsters. Finally then, the class that I expect to score the highest is going to be the Sorcerer. The reason for that, lightning based builds for this class get near infinite teleport. teleports. And teleporting like that is the fastest, most consistent movement tool in the entire game, as simple as that. It is smooth as butter, one point to the next, fully controllable, no time from point A to point B like Charge has to deal with, and in the right build, you can both be teleporting, essentially constantly, while also killing enemies in milliseconds at tier 70 difficulty, especially due to Raiment of the Infinite making you pull all enemies in close every time you teleport, compared to Barbarian having to track everything down a bit more manually. The build that we expect to do the best for this is a variant Arclash build, which again we have a full build video for on the channel already, and the idea behind this is using the Unstable Currents ultimate to fire off random lightning skills every time you use a lightning skill, pairing that with a high attack speed and mobility and general buffs using Arclash as a basic skill, and then you just have all these lightning skills going off, all of your damage bonuses tied to lightning, you just roll through the place launching off spells, decking everything as you move at the speed of light essentially, and while AoE is a breeze, bosses don't really slow you down much at all. Overall, I really expect the main difference between Sorcerer and Barb to be actually relatively small in score. I think Sorcerer gains some score from just pure movement speed, even though Barb is faster at the actual killing parts usually, and that will make a relatively large difference, honestly. Then I think Druid will be in a firm third place, a decent step down from Barb, but likely also a decent step above the Rogue in fourth, which will probably also be a decent step above Necromancer in fifth, again, simply due to the movement speed and Unstoppable constraints really, because Unstoppable is probably going to be a big deal as well. Of course, there'll be enemies that apply crowd control, and being able to remove crowd control from yourself consistently is really important to staying mobile within this activity. And that just about does it for today then everyone, a full ranking list of the 5 classes in the game and how I expect them to perform as far as the highest scores will look within the Gauntlet, at least in the opening weeks. And then of course just the builds that I predict to be the best for each class as this whole thing develops, and obviously some weeks there will be unique aspects of the Gauntlet that change in ways that incentivize build changes into the fold, things like different affixes on the actual dungeon. But under standard conditions, and honestly in most variants aside from hard blockers of certain things, these are the 5 builds that I expect to be pretty standard through the Gauntlet week in and week out until season 4 really. What are your thoughts then? Do you agree with my placement predictions? Honestly, I'd love to see your thoughts, and then when we have our first week or 2 under wraps, whoever's right can brag and be all smug and stuff, which is fun. Well, at least it's fun for whoever wins, I suppose. All in all, the Gauntlet is meant to just be a fun new way to throw yourself at the game, trying to give you more reason to spend time actually playing this game in a different way. You shouldn't feel fully constrained to the builds that I mentioned, but I definitely think that they are the best ones for the specific activity at hand here. I hope you've all enjoyed this and hopefully it helps you out in some way if you're hunting those high leaderboard positions. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world our stage. Goodbye.